Hey, welcome to the Concord Restaurant Summit, day 3. And I am joined here with a panel of distinguished speakers and good friends. Bo Bryant out in San Diego, and I've got Craig Shelton here, also from New Jersey. I'm kind of, this is like East Coast versus West Coast kind of thing.
No beef here, though, man. You got
No
one of the
beef, no beef.
smartest guys I've ever met in my life on the show.
Awesome.
Two of the smartest guys.
Yeah, you two. I'm just trying to catch
Oh,
up. But hey, today's conversation, and it's something I think everyone wants as a topic, new business models. What are we looking at? How are we going to, move forward? I know, and you, and both of you, we've talked about this before individually, is that the way we did things before isn't going to work. So we got to like reinvent the kind of wheel and reinvent some business models. So I want to throw out to you, what is, and I'm going to throw out a topic. I know Craig has a big thing about it, UV. How about UV? How is UV, and what is UV? Because a lot of people don't know what UV is, and how is it going to have an impact on the future of restaurants and the new restaurant models?
Would you like to go first on
You,
that?
you go, Craig.
Okay,
you.
well, the UV is a partial solution. Ultraviolet light, it's one of the reasons when, bacteria and virus doesn't like the bright sunlight because it oxidizes its shell. UV, you have to understand there's three different groupings. The most powerful is called UVC, and that works extremely fast. It's also much more expensive to create a machine that does UVC. B is in the middle. That might take hours, several hours to disinfect a surface, and UVA could take 20 hours or longer. So it's UVA is almost pointless. UVB is something if you have all the time in the world. UVC is much more expensive to create, and it does it very fast, but it can also, burn things if you're not careful with it. But the problem with UV is not the solution for restaurants and many high traffic areas by itself, precisely because you have the problem of line of sight. That is, if something is shadowed by something else, it doesn't get treated. If something's in a crack, it doesn't get treated. If something is upside down under your tables, on the bottom of people's shoes, right? So the product that the technology that I believe is the decisive victory tool in this war is a combination of ozone and UVC. So, we have a brand new technology out from Ultratech, and it is a lamp that's super inexpensive by, commercial standards. The basic is only like $5,000. The portable is only $4,500. But we make something that's powerful enough for stadiums and auditoriums that unit's about $90,000 with 400-watt bulbs. These things can kill all microorganisms, all viruses in a matter of seconds with ozone, all bacteria, all prions, all pests like ants, flies, their larvae, their eggs, roaches, everything. So but the only problem with ozone is you have to run it when there is no one can be in the building. So you have to, you do this at night, hypothetically, and or you could do it between services. You just have to make sure the building is cleared for a few minutes. These units are so powerful, and this is why they're practical. They're practical because, like, I ran this in my house, which is 6,000 square feet. You got to know that the safe level of ozone, which you find in the atmosphere around you, is like 3/10 of 1 part per million. What will kill all these microorganisms, including coronavirus, is only 9/10 of 1%. It's a tiny, tiny difference. Okay. But that's just too much to be breathing it in for any length of time. You can injure your lung cells. So I think in my house, it took about 8 minutes to generate that much ozone that everywhere in the house was registered at 1.2 parts per million. Tremendous power. Then the other great thing about ozone is that it dissipates. Ozone is created naturally when lightning hits. When lightning happens, what it does is it basically combines two oxygen O2s, right? Two oxygen molecules together is stable O2. That's what we breathe in. And temporarily become O3, three oxygen molecules linked together. That's very unstable. May only last for a few minutes. And what will happen is you'll run this machine on a timer. Maybe it's 10 minutes if it's 2,500 square feet. Maybe it's 20 minutes if it's longer. The machine shuts off because of your timer automatically. Then you might wait 10, 15 minutes, and it all dissipates up through your HVA system, sanitizing it as well. Okay. And of course, you could decide to use it multiple times a day. You could be making the very visible, and for your customers' benefit, you could be, closing your restaurant, let's say right after lunch at 3 o'clock, do a 1/2 hour treatment, bring everybody back in. So the main concept here is viral load. What we see from all the evidence is the people who are getting sick the most are the ones who are staying in their homes, the ones who are staying in nursing homes. Somehow or other, somebody brings virus into the home or into the facility. Might be a package, might be a piece of mail, might be on someone's shoes, might be on someone's hands. And then what happens, over time, day after day, it reproduces exponentially until, however long that might be, several days or several weeks, the viral load becomes so intense that people start getting sick easily. So the point with this type of treatment is to daily, or even more frequently, reset the viral load to zero. So you never get to that viral load that is so deadly.
Craig, what's the clear time? How long does it take to clear the room? I mean, after it's hit its saturation level, how much time does the room need to be emptied before people can re-enter?
Supposing, again, if you're using and we would advise people to use a monitor, what we call an ozone monitor, and you're going to do a few practice runs to try not to go much more over 1.2 part per million, because there's no need. Because the more you go over that, the longer you need the reset, the longer you need time to dissipate.
Sure.
If you just choose to do it naturally. But usually, in our case, when we go to 1.2, usually about 7 or 8 minutes is fine thereafter.
So,
but one more thing, if you want to be, insanely overprotective, right? You could also install manganese dioxide catalytic converters, and they can clear a room of ozone in almost instantly. So if you wanted to have, if time was so valuable, like in the case of a hotel lobby, that might be exactly what I would recommend, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want the hotel lobby to be, uninhabitable for more than, the 10 minutes required of the ozone treatment. Then you'd turn on these manganese dioxide catalytic converters, and you'd clear the room of the remnant residual ozone in fraction of the time. So it's in the most restaurant cases, that's not your obstacle. Just
so as far as saturation permeation goes, if I'm going to put it, let's say I've got the traditional restaurant USA, 2,500 square feet, a walled off front of the house, back of the house. I prop open the back door. Maybe I put it right in between the entrance to the front and the back. Does that give me enough reach and saturation value for that to kind of crawl into every crevice and orifice over a specific amount of time?
Yeah,
or
you probably
do you need to move the unit around?
You probably find these are so powerful for a tiny restaurant like that. You'd be well off. As long as every door can open, as long as you can prop open every closet. Now, if you have a basement, I'll get to some solutions to that. But let's just assume it's a single floor. If it was an open kitchen, even easier, right? But you may have locker rooms, this, that, the other. Certainly, if you think you need, if it's the more it's just one open room, the faster also, right? It penetrates, but it is a gas, so it does equalize very quickly. So I would imagine, you just open the door to everything, every glass closet, every last bathroom, locker rooms, right? Have everything open. This machine could probably do, my guess, in maybe 8 to 9 minutes. You're going to be above 1.2, my guess. But again, that's something to be calibrated. Every situation, every restaurant is its own, its own percentage of, you would want to do your own calibration. Now, the other interesting thing is we have a portable unit, okay? And the portable unit, which is a little less money, it's $4,500. That's really interesting in the sense that you could be sterilizing your food as it comes in the back door. You could
That was
actually put
my
this.
question. Food safety.
You put
right?
this unit inside your Cisco truck or whoever's delivering to you, run it for 2 minutes, then they can open the door to the truck. Now you can bring it safely into, let's call it your receiving room. Close the door in that. Your workers could be in protective gear wearing ozone respirators, a special thing like that, and the UV glass you could, or not, but the point is you could put the thing in, unwrap all the packages there, and then hit it with another round of ozone. Okay, so now you can put everything away, knowing you've not allowed anything to get in through the back door. Okay, now you could go a step further. Let's just say you butchered a whole couple of cases of chickens, which there's always a small chance they could have salmonella. Put them on wire racks or whatever, and roll that wire rack into your special room, your receiving room, and turn on that ozone for 2 minutes, and boom, let it clear, dissipate. You could bring the portable thing, put it into your walk-ins, and do that periodically. Okay, so all sorts of ways. The thing is, the utility of this machine doesn't end even if an antidote or a vaccine was found for corona. It's because there are going to be more. There are going to be other viruses in the future. There are going to be other types of
just foodborne illness, right?
Exactly.
I mean, look what happened with foodborne illness across the United States in the last 5 years alone. We saw it bring a big brand like Chipotle to its knees, right? Imagine the impact of something like this in their back of the house. And if they ran that thing every night at the close of business, came back in the morning, and, I think
this was originally developed for the pig farmers, the abattoirs, the processing plants for pork, because they are the most fragile animals in terms of viral susceptibility. But it was rejected. They didn't feel that it was worth the cost. This tiny little cost. They just didn't feel it was worthwhile. And
what's a foodborne illness cost you?
Look at it now. Look at all these plants that have these epidemics with their workers, and what that might cost in legal liability. I was talking with somebody today who's very, very well known, and he said he was talking to his insurance company about this, and they were having a wet dream that because who's going to build, who's going to finance the next hotel, the next high-rise apartment building, the next mall, without being able to get insured against this type of epidemic.
Right.
And what insurance company is going to insure against epidemic if you don't have this technology?
Yep, boy, 100%.
So, Bo,
just
describe, if you could, and I know this is all theoretical, but give us what does the perfect restaurant look like? What size? What do they have as far as, how many menu items? How big a staff? What would you say is if you had to build the new ideal model? It would be fast casual, full service.
Thanks for dumbing it down for me. I cannot keep up with Craig's level of sound and madness in that. So we're going to go from grad school to grade school now. Sorry, folks, but this is look, short term. Here's what I love. Here's the dovetail of a really important conversation. What Craig is talking about, I hope, becomes a catalyst for a different conversation. We saw yesterday some really impressive findings coming out of this clinical trial, phase 2 of this potential vaccine, and it's very, very dynamic. It's probably the first time, I think, in recorded history that we've ever manipulated the genetic structure of a disease, extracted the RNA markers from that disease instead of taking the existing disease itself and trying to lower the dose and infect people with the dose like we do with the flu and smallpox and everything else. That this is now a brand new frontier in medicine. The findings are really, really impressive. Then you look at Craig's machine, and all of a sudden there's some hope on the horizon that hopefully all this short-term panic thinking is starting to quell a little bit. And so I say all of that because I'm not going to answer the question in a short-term capacity. If I had to, I would say the new way forward is food trucks with super, super light furniture, food trucks that tow a trailer full of plastic tables and chairs, and they just go do pop-up restaurants in parks or outdoor areas all over the place because that's where people feel the most safe. You can socially distance, not give up capacity, et cetera, et cetera. But that's short-term thinking. But it is important thinking because it's fractional or bifurcated thinking, and that's probably one of the silver linings that have come out of this, is that I think this is teaching everybody to not be so monocular in their approach to revenue, right? It's a one and done, smash and grab, single vertical, and we're screwed because now we're limited, right? And I've had a lot of conversations about that. So instead of necessarily what the physical concept looks like, I would focus more on how many different bifurcated channels of accessibility your guests have and how many different ways they can enjoy or experience your brand. You've got to carve out those multiple revenue streams. And that's always been.
May I add something to that, Bill?
Of course.
You know, because I was talking today with David Burke, and his group's going to go for this with every single place. When we were talking about this idea of vestibuling, okay, where you might have a plastic tent to the entrance, or you might have some kind of glass and steel vestibule built where all customers have to walk through it with an ozone respirator on and maybe the UV glass. And they go through there and they get decontaminated on the way in. Okay, so not bringing things in on their shoes, fingers, hands, whatever, doorknobs, everything. Another way to think about this is the peace of mind it could bring to people in their day-to-day. I'm getting, daily, I'm getting my body, knocked down of any residual virus. Now, of course, the problem is somebody can still bring it in their lungs, right? Mm-hmm. It's not disinfecting their interior.
Right.
But we are working on technology, and I don't know, if it'll get there in time. The idea of pulsing very quickly ozone, so that the rate in the room never reaches any dangerous level, but that it might tamp down the viral load and keep it, for that several hours between. But again, I really do believe that if you are completely sanitizing a facility at least once a day, you have dramatically reduced the chances of anybody getting sick. That's my belief.
Well, and Craig, look, that forces a great segue into a broader conversation. And here is, it's not really popular, and I'm not trying to shame anybody, but here's what I found out throughout this pandemic and throughout all the conversations and the different channels and committees and even all the video content I put out and the feedback that's come back. People are finally being forced to start embracing the disciplines of our industry that have been neglected for years. Look, and Craig, what you're talking about, even with the vestibule, that still is short-term thinking, right? Because we will evolve and adapt past this, but in deference to your machine, that's needed, period. Again, I go back to the Chipotle model. You watch a brand lose 50% of its stock, 100% of its consumer confidence, often sales 30 to 50% across the nation because of foodborne illness multiple times, right? And it was trace factor back to the way it was handled inside the restaurant, not necessarily the way that the product arrived into the restaurant. Hopefully I don't get sued for libel or slander because it's been so buried and nobody can really tell exactly what's happened. But I spoke to industry experts. The commodity chain between produce and meats was the only possible path, and there was no traceability back to any of that. So they had They definitely had some flaws in their supply chain and their lateral purchasing schema to save money, which was silly. But it all boils down to, I don't care if the product comes in tainted or not. It's your responsibility to make sure it's healthy, healthful, and safe for the guest. Something like this machine that you're talking about, and I'm not just trying to pick on Chipotle, but I'm saying your machine has been needed way before this. It will come past this and still be incredibly necessary. That's just one discipline of investing and protecting your brand, right? Brand protection. Think about the exposure. It doesn't matter if you've got 100 units or 1 unit. You're fully exposed if you have any kind of foodborne illness or outbreak, right? It'll be interesting to see what contact tracing does over this short period of time. There's been a lot of states and a lot of restaurants that have been kind of cavalier in their approach to reopening. And I'm not faulting them. The science and the numbers are very inconsistent and very murky. So I think that's causing some places to be a bit more cavalier because of it. Forget all that. Who cares? But just imagine what happens when the contact tracing brings something back to your restaurant. What's the consumer confidence at that point? What's the action plan? What are you doing to mitigate that in the first place? Look, you invest in your machine. What you do, it's minor, right? But we've seen these disciplines starting to take shape, and the need for fiduciary discipline, operational discipline, liability discipline. We're starting to see all those things, come to the forefront of the operator's mind. That's what makes me so excited about what's going on in our industry. I know it seems kind of screwed up, but it really does. If we could do this better, smarter, safer, faster, more profitably, and more diverse, we're going to be a better industry coming off the backside of it.
The problem, of course, is that this form of capitalism, this radical change that happened starting in the early 70s, what we call neoliberalism, right? Finance capitalism is another term for it, is something that unfortunately puts pressure on every operator for a race to the bottom in terms of cleanliness, in terms of just saving money at any cost. Right?
You're 100% right.
So, the one magnificent gift of coronavirus is exposing all the lies of finance capitalism and saying, there is no such thing as a market solution to epidemic. You need a command economy temporarily to truly win a war. You need to compensate. As I said to Donald in the last interview, I look at the moral foundations of a shelter-in-place order as akin to a eminent domain instruction. This is the idea that it's not borne equally by all the different businesses. Restaurants are asked to basically shut completely, or effectively are, but some things, like perhaps a law firm, are able to continue on as if nothing happened. And so it's not borne fairly, uniformly across all. In these instances where there's such a gross difference between the level of sacrifice asked of one type of business versus another, the level of sacrifice asked of one type of human being versus another, to me it seems to trigger the call for a eminent domain type of response, which is the idea that we ought to be compensating to some way or another for the sacrifices we're asking at an unequal level. And that doesn't necessarily mean massive amounts of money in. As I said, on 99% of all this suffering that we're going through, with everybody at each other's throat, with the left and right nearly at a civil war right now, all because we don't do the obvious thing, which is to put, and other nations have done it, you put a moratorium on all debt service payment and all rent, basically all economic rent, until this is over without accrual. You simply start up and you add those extra months to the end of whatever structure, debt structure, financial obligation, financial claim you're talking about.
That's right.
The billionaires,
the
billionaires don't need, if you already have $100 fucking billion, you don't need 101 billion right now. Okay?
Right.
Stop being such a fucking pig.
Well
Agreed.
done.
Agreed. So, in that vein, then Craig, I'm curious, what do you think about California has just introduced a bill, and I don't know where it's at. I just read about it a couple days ago, and I can't remember the bill, 868, 898, whatever the bill number is. But that bill gives restaurants, for example, people that have leases, the ability to get out of their lease with no bankruptcy, no forbearance, no financial debt or obligation because of this. And it's a mechanism designed specifically for the small guy by the government to allow those people to really foster some critical negotiation with landlords. And some of the stuff that's come out has been, very disappointing, right? You see the leverage strategy that somebody like a Cheesecake Factory has. They're in every Simon Mall across the USA. They can negotiate with Simon Properties and say, hey, we're an anchor. We drive up your total rent in all of your malls. We go away, you're screwed. They have a leverage proposition. So they're jamming, the rental or the landlord, and the landlord is caving to them, but then the little guy who's right next door in the barbecue shop in the same mall reaches out to the landlord because he heard about this, and the landlord's like, pay your bills or we'll crush you, right? So this was intentionally designed as a mechanism to help the little guy, and I get it, but I'm super curious about what your thoughts are on that. And sorry, Don, this is your show. I'm just interviewing Craig now.
I'm having fun just watching. I'm having fun just watching you two.
Well, Donald, what's your opinion on it first before I go?
About what? Which one?
What this bill in California? These types of obstacles.
I like that. I like the bill. I like I like the thought of people being able to get a clean slate and starting over.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I mean, there should be some kind of moratorium in place where everyone just gets some kind of, we just like, all right, during this thing's going on, everything just kind of like, nope, let's just kind of shut it all down. Let's wipe the slate clean. Let's start over when this thing gets back to somewhat whatever normal is going to be.
Well, what you see is this. The truth of the matter is that the lessons of the Obama era and the present era are that the 0.1% can detach itself from the rest of society. It is oblivious and it is immune to any repercussions. You could have all the citizens, in the nation voting to go left, and they can continue to go right. They are immune. At least they feel they are. Much of this is because every single public policy, major public policy motion, whether from the left or the right, is designed to protect the asset wealth of the 0.1% at whatever cost, at whatever damage to the rest of society. Okay, so don't make the mistake of thinking you are in a capitalist nation. We certainly are no longer a capitalist nation, not even remotely. And this is a very hard thing to stomach, to be able to realize that you'd much prefer the red pill, most people.
It's true.
The blue pill is very, very scary. And what are you going to do about it? What you're going to understand is the first thing is that we live basically in a society in which might makes right. Okay, and you're going to have these rare occasions when there's catastrophic things that happen like this coronavirus. These are the one and only rare moments where we could possibly restore capitalism, possibly restore democracy into America, because it is vanishing. All we have left are some wisps of a capitalist democracy. It is vanishing right before our eyes. So we had no problem delivering essentially $20 trillion of newly created money to protect the 0.1%.
Out of thin air.
I know.
Right? It's all money manufactured out of thin air. But what's even more startling to people, they don't realize, they talk about government printing money and they get all agitated and bent out of shape, completely oblivious to the fact that the commercial banks have printed many multiples of that. That is, if you go from basically 1960 to 2009, when the money supply was at its maximum peak,
Mm-hmm.
the US government had only increased the monetary base by 1% of the total eventual, but the commercial banking industry at the unit level, not the central bank, had done it, had increased the money supply 100-fold. 100-fold. And all of that attacked. That causes artificial asset price inflation. This is the secret mechanism by which you redistribute wealth from the poor to the rich, from the young to the old. So, how do I respond to what's going on in California? Right? The idea of the restaurant itself is asinine. In the way leases have been written over the last 25 years, if you look at the risk and the return on invested capital of the two different parties in a lease, you have the operator who, let's say, is going to put in $5 million for a build out of a good sized restaurant. Okay. And you have the landlord who bought that space where the restaurants go, let's just say for the same $5 million. Okay. But the landlord only put maybe 1 million, 20% down, even less, maybe $500,000 down, and floated 95% of it with a mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about the build out of a restaurant, which is so insecure, it almost has to be all equity money. Right? It's very fragile. If the thing goes belly up, all the assets that were the operators essentially become the assets of the landlord. Okay. Once, if you want, I could pull up and I could share a screen and I could show you one of these blue, spreadsheets that shows the return to the investor compared to the return to the tenant. And what you'd see is that almost every lease is 100 times unfair to the tenant. Okay. There's almost no lease in America that I would sign. It is so upside down, so absurdly upside down. What I'm trying to say is the days of these things are over. What you should never be doing is signing a leasehold where you have to put the money in for the build out. It should be entirely 100% TI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it should be simply a management contract. But there's no way in hell should the restaurateur take on the financial responsibility for anything that becomes a lease, the owner, anything that's permanently, no HVAC, no piping, no this, no that, nothing that you can't remove when you go out should be financed by you.
Yeah.
It's time to bring to remove the financial idiocy that permeates our industry. The idea that anyone should be making a managerial decision who doesn't understand what net present value is, right? Stop. You've done enough to your own company. You've done enough. Go get this book, Financial Entrepreneurial Finance. Okay? Go get that and read it, and don't make another managerial decision until you've read that and you've understood it. Okay? Every single financial decision, every expenditure should, in a certain sense, be run by a present value test, a net present value test. Is the predicted cash flow improvement, the new, additional cash flow predicted by this additional expenditure, right? Is the present value of that greater than the cost? Mm-hmm. And if it's not, you just don't do it. And if you were to use that basic litmus test, you would sign almost zero leases in this country.
Right, but that's banking on intelligence and awareness, education, and unfortunately, we're in an industry rife with the opposite. This is America, the land of opportunity, and that is predatorial based on the predictive nature of the lack of intelligence experience, especially in our industry. How many industries do you know where you can open a business, get a loan for as much money as you can, and literally have next to no education? I can't think of another industry, and there certainly isn't one that's grown this fast and been this opportunistic, right? And so it's just embraced and coddled.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Cinderella story. Anybody can go do it, but you can have $10 in your pocket and you can make this happen, and only in America, right? It's predatorial. There's this predatorial behavior, and by the way, this does not end or just begin with the financial construct and the relationship and the inequities between landlord and tenant. This is everywhere, right?
You know, Bo, you're bringing up the absolutely perfect next level of discussion here, which is the predicate in most jurisprudence pertaining to contract law is that both parties are informed.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore they seek and achieve something which is mutually beneficial, which is a relative, it's the quaint notion, right? This ridiculous mythology that both sides achieve through negotiation a reasonably fair deal. All it takes is a couple of split seconds of forensic analysis to realize that almost never happens, right? Precisely because landlords tend to be extraordinarily educated in finance and have the money to have extraordinary MBA, top talent in their teams, and restaurateurs tend to be poor and came up without education in most of the cases. So it's a completely uneven, unlevel playing field like that, and there needs to be, I think, some mild form of guidelines here that may help. But again, in a market-based economy, it's really incumbent upon listen, you know how many times people have hired me to do a forensic analysis, right? And unfortunately, 99 times out of 100, I come back and say, only an idiot would do this deal, right? And then people go ahead and they still do it, even though they paid me to do a week's worth of effort on this. And then they come back a year later and, oh, Jesus, I wish I'd listened to you, and I'm upside down and I'm losing $500,000 a month. And I said, now you're going to end up paying me, hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix this horrible mistake you made. I wish you'd listened in the first place. But, people make their purchases on the basis of emotion, right?
Right.
And those days it's just over. It's over. The whole idea of a one-man show or a mom and pop. Those days are gone.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
What's the future look like then?
All right, I'll go. I'll give the dumb version, and then.
Okay, I'm going to throw in here right now. Like last time you said, we went from the PhD level to the grade school level. I was listening to you talk. That was not grade school level. All right, Bo?
Well, I love listening to Craig. He makes me think. I am actually writing down probably more notes than the people out there watching. Every time I hear Craig talk, all I do is.
What do you think I'm doing too? I'm writing notes too. I'm like crazy here writing notes.
I think, in a simplified level, I think that there's some exercise. I hope that there's some exercise that, will come from the concept of the law of diminishing returns and the importance and understanding of return on investment. I think right now we're not doing enough to. I did a speech on this a while ago, and I can't remember the exact language that I used, but I believe it kind of starts at the org chart, right? And Craig and I have had some conversation about this. He is way more versed and dynamic about this for sure. But in my opinion, when you deconstruct the org chart, take one step back. There's been a challenge with legacy rules forever. We're intellectual slaves to what has always been is what always needs to be. We don't question the shit that's happening. We're just spoon-fed. This is what your org chart needs to look like. This is what your investment value ratio study is relative to how much you charge for everything, how much you pay employees, et cetera, et cetera. It's never been more clear than it is today. Another silver lining from the COVID pandemic is all of these historical antiquated legacy rules are starting to be questioned. Jack Dorsey just the other day announced that a great majority of his employees that work for Twitter never have to come back from working from home. They get to continue to do that. So we know that's going to have an impact on real estate, right? Office buildings are going to be smaller. Different companies that I've heard talking about, this is a permanent strategy. We're going to reduce our footprint in real estate, you know, and what we're leasing and renting, because we found incredible productivity in this. So all these legacy rules do need to be challenged. I think in our business in particular, we've got to look at how we really rationalize the value of a person and determine is that the role of a person or is it the role of a process, right? The infinite monkey theorem. Like there are things that are so redundant and repetitive that why is somebody doing that? I remember that show, I always think of that TV show that ran for a long time called Lost, right? There's this guy Desmond who was in this bunker, and every however many minutes he had to push this button or the planet would explode. It was just this repetitive thing. And I think of that, remember that little bird when you were kids that had like water on both sides of it and it like tipped it every couple seconds? That damn thing could have pushed the button. The guy could have been free and enjoying his life. That's a metaphor for how we have to look at our org charts. If you have a person doing a process, pushing that button, likely the return on investment is going to be much stronger, maybe a little bit more upfront money to find a technology to replace the person that's in a process-driven role so that you can put the right people in the right labor dollar investment in getting ROI from those people, right? What they do has got to return income. It needs to make sense, specifically in our industry, right? There's very few support mechanisms that are justified in a person capacity. It's got to be a 5x multiplier of exchange on labor investment to return on investment with revenue, right? All the other stuff doesn't really make sense. Does it make sense to have a guy in a kitchen for 5 hours sanitizing every single wall and baffle and fixture in the place every single day? Or do you spend $5,000 on a machine that Craig has that'll do it for you in 20 minutes? I mean, you look at the compounding return on a big upfront investment, but it's paid off in a very short term. This is a crazy rant. I know I'm going all over the place, but finding this assimilated complement and in the value of where we use technology, where we can use rudimentary technology like writing down a damn process, training everybody to understand the process, putting that process in place, and then you don't need a babysitter that you're paying $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year to enforce the process. If everybody knows what the process is, what the rules are, what the recourse is if you don't follow it, we can self-govern without a babysitter. It doesn't make any damn sense. So, sorry, that's the rant. Very lowbrow, but now, Craig, take it away.
But I think the restaurant of the future is a new kind of team where you're going to have you're still going to have some wonderful human beings who are great craftsmen, love working with their hands, aesthetic, intuitive. But I think your new teams are going to have a lot of highly educated people also. I think you're going to find that the new restaurant model has PhDs in it, or, MBAs. Second thing is this: it's important to understand that when you say what works, what is the right thing to do, what are the right standard operating procedures, those things, if they are ever correct, are only conditionally correct for the circumstances of that moment in time in that location. And therefore, anytime a company says, we're going to continue to do it this way because that's the way we've done it, they're automatically wrong.
Yep.
100% of the time, it is wrong to stay the same because you are in an environment where the economic and political forces are always changing against you. The processes of a British banking system combined with an income-based taxation system means you as a restaurant are always under exponential threat. It's growing at an exponential rate. If you continue doing what you've always done, things are only going to get exponentially worse.
Right. That's a flawed quote. Do what you always did, get what you always got. Bullshit.
Right,
that's a law of diminishing returns. If you keep banging your head against the wall until it bleeds, you're going to eventually bleed out. You're not going to get the same result. You're going to die.
I've heard
Right?
it
It
said
gets
in
progressively
like
worse.
thousands of people have said to me, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Well, that means you don't even understand what you're talking about,
Right.
because the world is constantly changing. That was phrased that way could only be true if the world was static, unchanging. But since the world is always changing, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result is true. You know, it's always going to get worse.
Right.
Expecting the same result is what's insane.
Right.
Okay.
Expecting the same
Expecting that
result.
you can continue to run your restaurant the same way year after year and continue to get 10% net operating income, that's what's insane. If you're not changing faster than the changes around you, watch your profits vanish and go negative. That's inexorable law. The second thing I would say is don't sell food. Don't sell beverage. This is idiotic. That's what grocery stores do. Okay. You got to understand that you need to sell safe space. You need to, like, you know, when you look at the magnificence of the Starbucks model, okay, it's the shopping centers, right? Those malls. They drove out the agora from Main Street, the place where everyone met, the place where you socialized, the place which provided community, which was a great socialization arena of the last, you know, of America since its birth, right up until the mid 70s. That was Main Street, decimated its social function by the malls. And what Starbucks' genius was to give this space, right? It's not about the $2 coffee or $3 coffee. It's about, here is a space for the agora that had been lost. Now it's time for restaurants to reclaim the agora. Now, gentlemen, I have to sign off in just a few minutes for I have a hard stop, but I just in case just wanted to put that alert up.
Awesome.
I've only got a few more minutes.
It's a brilliant comment, right? I mean, Starbucks is kind of follow that human sigma, right? Disrupting everything and really looking at it for face value. I don't think that they were captured by that intellectual slavery, right? They've done a lot.
If you're a guy who's got fallen on hard time, maybe for no fault of your own, or maybe for your own fault, you went bankrupt or something. Okay, but you now have. If you go to, you know what Starbucks sells? Starbucks sells human dignity. For $2.80, I can get a large black coffee and have human dignity. Okay, I could have a business meeting there. I could socialize there. I could, if I wanted to, I could, you know, if you wanted to go on a date, all of that. They have nice leather chairs. They have Wi-Fi. For the price of a fucking cup of coffee, you can have a moment of human dignity in your otherwise, you know, horrific dystopian life that these recent radical movements have done in our economy. So think about what, you know, how you can take that notion and expand upon it with the magnificent spaces that restaurants command.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. Here, I guess my my hashtag for the group would be restaurant renaissance, right? There's still a balance, right? There is, and Craig called it out, there is that importance of the craft. There's that importance. I still believe, ladies and gentlemen, in hospitality, in the importance of providing that dignity to human beings, and that careful, thoughtful touch. That's the innovative model in hospitality. But that cannot be divorced from the responsibility of science. The Renaissance saw this amazing maturation and evolution in our human lineage, unlike anything else. And that's because we understood and embraced the value and the equal importance of art and science. And far too many operators have divorced themselves from the science because it makes us look corporate. We look like the man. Let go of that bullshit, right? There's no shame in succeeding. There's shame in failure. And if you're turning a blind eye to what some big corporation does, and you don't want to be cast in that mold, you're out of your goddamn mind. You'd better balance it. You can still infuse your art. So I have this concept called the knife and the whisk, and it's a metaphor for that exact balance of the restaurant renaissance, right?
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
you put a knife into shit, your customer can never tell that you chopped that vegetable versus a machine chopping that vegetable. That's the sellout. That's what makes you like everybody else. And you can justify the labor in putting a knife in something because you're doing something by hand, by scratch. That's nonsense. And yet you'll divorce yourself from the whisk. You won't invest in your own unique recipe and mix your own unique dressing because you're spending so much time chopping lettuce, potato, onion, tomato that you buy somebody's pre-made bullshit dressing that has zero attachment to your signature approach to the business. And I know that's crazy. I'm going off on another rant, but it's that balance. There is a balance. There's an intersection of responsibility, and you have to look at what is this effort going to do for me? What is the
I think of it
return
this way, Bo. I think of it this way. When I talk about being a chef, right? It's all of your life experiences you bring, all that baggage, the hardship and the joys, the suffering, the intellect, the reading, the life experiences, the loves, the lost loves, all of that is what informs an artist. You want to think science is a liability? Talk about Ferran Adrià, the greatest creative mind of all time. Science, you don't think of it like as a liability. It's like the single greatest transformation of cuisine happened because Ferran Adrià embraced science, and also Heston Blumenthal, and also. You want to be in the pantheon of the best chefs in the world today, you better fucking study science. You don't have a chance without it.
Right. Absolutely right. Look, one of my personal idols, Leonardo da Vinci, right? That's a guy who knew science better than anybody, but he's most acclaimed for his art. But in his art, the guy got so frustrated with paints, as an example, that he couldn't get the right textures and hues to create lift and volume and shadowing. So he decided to take a hiatus and I can't remember how much it was, a year or two hiatus from his art to go study paint. And he ended up creating his own paint. Now, immersing yourself into that level of science, and I know I'm dumbing it down, but I'm just trying to create something that everybody can kind of relate to. That's what bore the Mona Lisa. It wasn't great technique. It was understanding how the entire ecosystem of what he was immersed in, how it worked, and his responsibility to contribute to it if he wanted a better product and a better outcome. That's it.
Exactly. Well, I can leave you with one last idea, which is the political sphere, because the problems of artificial asset price inflation that you experience as a restaurateur, the fact that rents rise 10 times faster than you can raise your prices on average in America, 100 times in some locations, is a political choice. It's not that capitalism has to work this way. Germany figured it out 225 years ago. Rich people play stupid on this. We don't have to always race to the bottom. If we could set some standards for our industry and say, we're going to take care of our workers. Okay? One of the most important things we could do would be to rally and use our political power and get our employees behind us to change the way the social safety net is taxed, where employers have to pay on a per capita, on a head count basis, rather than the way they do it in the rest of the world. They have some type of a VAT tax, a value-added consumption tax, or it can be an income tax. But restaurants carry 100 times higher a rate of taxation than big tobacco when it comes to the employment taxes. It's just fucking insane. It's so upside down. Okay. And this causes nothing but social upheaval. And so what we need to do is we need to become educated. We need to understand everybody is America, as Churchill said, always gets it right after exhausting every fucking possible alternative. Okay. And that's what we are in this industry. We still haven't exhausted every fucking possible alternative. But how about we stop that that nonsense and start actually doing the one greatest taboo of all things in restaurant industry, which is to do critical thinking. And we would realize that we're fighting all the wrong wars against all the imagined enemies. These false propositions that infect the restaurant industry turn our employees into our enemy when they should be our ally, like a family, like a brother, like a sister, like a daughter and son. They ought to be with us, but that's not how we behave. And our customers should be our allies, like our uncles and aunts and nephews and nieces. And that's not the way we do it. Our intellectual apparatus is completely decayed and rotted and needs to be rejected wholesale and replaced with better thinking and starting with true first assumptions rather than what we have. So at any rate, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I have to get off.
Drop the mic. That was awesome.
But thanks, guys.
No, awesome. Hey, I want to say thank you so much for being on today, Craig. Bo, thank you so much. I tell you, I got like 5 pages of notes here, and probably 25% of my new book is already formulating in my head. So I want to say thank you so much, both of you. Everyone be safe, and thanks for tuning in today.
See you guys. See you, Craig.